This podcast is brought to you by Lily of the Valley Farm Retreat. Come together at Lily of the Valley. Asaka.ph, your geo-solutions partner. Hi, everyone. Joining me today all the way from Helsinki, Finland. Please welcome to the show, Romayne Jay. Hi, Romayne.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. This is fantastic and really looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, Romayne, it's an honor and privilege for us to have you on the show. And you're not new to the field of speaking and encouraging and coaching people. And I know a lot of our listeners are very interested in the kind of life that you live, especially as a speaker, as a resource person. But yeah, it's a whole big animal to attack. But can you please tell our listeners what it is that you do? How do you change the world on a normal day? And yes, what does it look like?
Okay. So as you rightfully said, I love words. I love changing people's mindsets through words. And I've actually been running women empowerment programs, personal development programs for quite a long time. I've worked with women in business. I've worked with orphanages. I've got a very strong heart for orphanages. And girls in universities, just like a different group of women, and more on the subjects of identity, purpose, and potential. So that is the message that I feel that I was born to deliver to my generation. And I am the founder of Esteem Kultur. This is a personal development initiative. And this is on the same topics of identity, purpose, and potential. And essentially, like, my heart is to see women and their dreams flourish. So I want to see people flourish. I want to see people's dreams flourish. And I use words to do that. So words are my love. And just trying to use the power of words to help people change their minds about themselves. Because if people can change their minds about themselves, you can put a tool in their hand and you can empower them to do anything. And yeah, so that's what I do.
Wow, that's very powerful. I mean, you said it all. I think we could end the episode on that note. But well, you said that you are into helping people discover their identity and purpose. And as a branding expert, I personally know how important identity to a brand is.
Mm-hmm.
But you've seen a lot of women go through your program, and I know there's different kinds of struggles and different kinds of issues that come up with it. But like, how important is identity as in an individual? I mean, I know how important it is as a brand, as a company, but how does it affect an individual, and how does it change the narrative of their life?
Mm-hmm. It's a very good question. I think people underestimate the importance of knowing what it is you carry and knowing how it is you've been called to function. So who you are as a person. So I think that there are two elements, right, when it comes to identity. One being even just the knowing, because a lot of the times, like even if you look biblically, people missed out on their purpose because they didn't have the revelation about who they were. So either they didn't make the most of their potential. So in Jacob, when you talk about like the soup, when he says, what is my birthright, right? So he says that I would rather have this food because, like, what is my birthright? So there was an essence of not putting value on what the relevance of having his birthright was. So, and if you look at, the children of Israel, it's like a theme, actually. If you look throughout the word, it's a theme where a lot of the times that, God would always call people to do something. The one thing he would do, like, again, I'm going to jump because I love the Bible. So that's always like my reference point. But if you look at like Abraham, right? He says that this is what I'm calling you to do. And then he says, now I'm calling you Abraham, right? So he's saying that I am calling you according to your purpose. Like, it is important for you to see yourself the way that I see you. Otherwise, you will not be able to believe, right, that you're the vessel that I'm going to use for this particular thing. If you look at the children of Israel, when they went to look at the promised land and they were trying to scout the promised land, they came back, right? They were like, the land is great. So thank you for that. However, we were like grasshoppers. What was the problem here? The problem here is that they were not able to see themselves the way that God sees them. So the issue of identity is a huge issue, because if you don't have the understanding of who it is that you are and what it is that you carry, if then you won't value it or you will misuse it. But when you start having a full understanding, you won't spend so much time like questioning whether or not you're capable, because you have the understanding that you have been made with everything that you need in order for you to fulfill that which you've been called to do.
Wow, that's very interesting. You're saying that for you to be able to outwork your purpose, you have to be secured in your identity. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. One of the scriptures that I love is where I think David says that I'm wonderfully and fearfully made. This is like, wonderful are your works. This is, and that my soul knows very well. I love that, right? Because it's saying that, it says, my soul deeply understands that I am wonderfully and fearfully made. There is like a sense of like self-acceptance there, which I think is very important for you to have that understanding, because then you understand how it is that you are supposed to function. You know, you won't kind of like wallow in insecurities of whether or not you're able to do something. You're kind of like able to go in the empowerment again of knowing that you have everything, that you've been given everything that you need in order for you to accomplish the purpose. Otherwise, the purpose might be available for you, but you don't step into it, right? The responsibility on the individual to step into that which they've been invited into. Because for me, when I look at purpose, I see that as an invitation. I see that as an invitation to participate in that chapter, in the Romayne chapter of God's story. So God already had a chapter for Romayne in his story, in the same way that he says to Jeremiah, he says, before I formed you in your mother's womb, he says, I knew you. And there was something that I had ordained you to do. He says, I ordained you a prophet. And it is up to him then to respond to that invitation and say, I want to participate in the chapter of Jeremiah in God's story. And it's the same for all of us. Like, I have a very strong conviction that each person who has been put on this earth was put on this earth with their own chapter, and that chapter being a chapter in God's story, but it is our responsibility to respond to that invitation. But if you keep second guessing, or if you cannot have an understanding, or rather of even like what part you're supposed to play in the story, then you spend a lot of time looking at other people's stories, trying to chase those stories. But when you start and you kind of go back, and then you have the revelation of, wait a minute, I have been called to be a part of this story. How have I been called to participate here? And then when you have a revelation of that, then you develop that, and then you step into that, and then kind of like live out your potential in the way that God envisioned.
Wow. I think that's a very key thing to what you just said. I know a lot of leaders who are leading organizations, small businesses and big organizations. We always call this like imposter syndrome, that I feel like there's a point when you're leading something, you always question if I'm worthy of leading this thing. I think it's not a question about purpose at that point, but it's more of like, why do you think people discount themselves for something? As what you said, like this is a chapter of their story in the mix of God's story. But why do you think people have that issue when it comes to pursuing their dream?
There's so many layers to this, honestly. And I talk about this as somebody who has struggled with this personally. And I think that it comes from different places. So if I think about my journey, when I started, you know, my relationship with God and kind of my growth in my relationship with God and trying to understand myself, I had to remove all the layers, because it's quite easy for us to kind of like put on different identities, because we're kind of like seeking for people to validate our existence in different ways. It's like everything you see is trying to tell you that this is the right way to be, or that's the right way to be. And a lot of the times we're kind of like adapting ourselves to different things, because we're trying to have like a sense of, is this good enough? Can someone tell me that this is good enough?
Yeah.
So I think that you end up getting so lost sometimes in all of that, that you don't have a strong sense of like, who are you and how are you called to function? So when you talk about like imposter syndrome, I think that there are two things. One, when you have an over focus on self, that is problematic, because when you're overly focusing on self, then you're overly focusing on your humanity. And you're overly focusing on your own lack, right? Your own inabilities. Yeah. So even like when God called Moses, right? And then Moses is like, listen, I don't know how to speak. I don't know. He's just like, I have a whole lot of reasons that I am not the right person to participate in this. right? Because he was focused on his humanity,
Yeah.
in his inabilities as far as his humanity is concerned. And those are natural things, right? Because when you think about a lot of the things, when we think about purpose and a lot of the things that we're called to do, we're actually called to go beyond our humanity, which is why necessary for us to have God in purpose. Because if you even look at the way that God responded to Moses, he says that Moses asked and he said, who am I that I should go? That was his question, right? And that's exactly the question that we keep asking, which is, who am I that I should go? Why me? Why not that guy? Why not that guy? Because I am aware of my humanity. And I know that according to my humanity, I am not the right person to do this, right? And then God's answer to Moses at the time says, who am I that I should go? And then I think God reverted back to himself. God didn't touch on who Moses was. He reverted back to who he was, right?
Wow.
But he's saying, actually, it's not important who you are. It's important who I am, because who I am is what's going to empower you to do what I am calling you to do. So I think that in essence, I think that sometimes the sense of being too inward focused then kind of like limits your ability to see the purpose, because now you're not even thinking about people. So if I think about speaking, for example, one thing I've always struggled with is being perfect, right? Delivering a perfect message, not getting anything wrong, and not, the ums and ahs, which I still do even when I speak. But the problem with that is now I was no longer focusing on the message, because the essence of purpose is the impact that it's supposed to have on the people that you are serving, right? That's purpose. Purpose is knowing what it is that you have to serve people so that it would have an impact in them, right? An impact on their lives that brings them closer to, whatever it is. For me, it is to bring them closer to their identity and to bring them closer to that which they've been called to do, and to be empowered to do it, to have that courage. So that is the essence of why I do what I do. It is not for me to be a perfect communicator. Of course, I'm responsible with the gift of communication, right? Because it's something that I've been given. But when I'm focused on the people, then I'm not worried so much about how I am going to appear, right? My bigger focus is, how is what I am doing going to bring about the most impact on the people? And then when you have that kind of like outward focus, I think that it frees you up. Because it no longer becomes about, you don't do it now. You're not doing it out of looking for validation. You're doing it because you're already secure in what it is that you have been called to deliver. Now you're not looking for validation. You're already validated in your relationship with God. Now what you're looking to do is to bring impact. And that becomes like the sole focus. Wow. And I think that for me, that has been quite a big factor in allowing me to step out and do it, even when I feel like I don't feel completely inadequate, or I don't feel completely prepared. Honestly, my job is to show up. That's what my job is, because I have to have the belief that I have what it is that is necessary to deliver what I have to deliver. And then I also have to trust, right? And then I have to say and trust, knowing that I'm not doing this out of my humanity. Actually, I'm doing this out of God's sovereignty and out of God's empowerment. And my job is to do the best with the gift, and then to show up and then allow him to deliver what he wants to deliver to his generation.
I think that's so profound. But I love it when you said, when we pursue our purpose, we are actually called beyond our humanity. And that's why we need God in every aspect of that. Wow, Romayne, speaking of purpose, now we're going to go to a little bit deeper on purpose. I hear so many people, especially young people and adults as well, that they're really struggling with purpose, just the idea of purpose. And to me, it sounds very basic, and it could have been something that, you have already figured out early on, but apparently it's not that easy. So can you please tell us, how did you discover your purpose and how it changed your life?
It's a very good question. So for me, my purpose journey, I was always asking the question about purpose. I just always had a thing where, so I would keep thinking, like, what is it I'm supposed to do? Again, when it comes to Jeremiah, right? When God says that before I formed you in the womb, he says, like, I knew you, he says, I ordained you this. And I thought, based on that, I would always think, God, what were you thinking when you created me?
Mm.
Like, what was it when you were thinking, Romayne, if she would be the exact person that I imagined her to be, what was that imagination? Who were you thinking that I would be? And I think I started asking this question quite a lot, because what I was struggling with personally is I was pursuing, certain studies that I wasn't particularly interested in, but I was doing that because it felt safe, right? So I was too scared to kind of step out to even discover what purpose looked like, because I was battling with picking a path that felt safe. I knew that if I study this and if I get work in that particular area, that I'm going to be okay. But the problem is that I think Dr. Miles Monroe, may you rest in peace. I loved him so much. And he talked a lot about purpose, but he used to say that purpose will make you uncomfortable until you find it. So for me, I was trying to make myself fit in a place that I knew I didn't fit. I might not have known where I was supposed to fit, but I knew I didn't fit there. And it made me uncomfortable. Then I would think, oh, maybe if I just do another job, let's just find another job. Maybe I like it a bit better. And then I would do that and I would still feel this discomfort. So now I had to have the courage, because I think that finding purpose is also about courage. You have to be willing to try things, because I think people have a very different experience of how they discover purpose, right? Some people, I heard people say, then a cloud came to my room and then I had a vision. Are you joking? If we all have that, that's amazing, right? That's amazing. Because we're never going to be confused. We're just going to be like, where's my cloud? I'm going to wait for my cloud. And as soon as that comes, then I will have like a full understanding of what I'm supposed to do. But the reality is that the journey does not always look like that, right? It just doesn't. It would be great if it did. But for me, I had to have the courage to go out and have a feel of where I fit. So this is like, I would look at the things that were burning in my heart. And I think that they are very practical ways, right? That you think about this. So I have a book actually, which is my purpose book. And I've had this book for a very, very long time. And what I would do is I would always write down the things that I would feel kind of were imprinted on my heart, with some kind of desires that were stirred in my heart for one reason or another. So maybe I would start seeing that I start caring a little bit about, women. For some reason, I started being moved about some women idea thing. And carry out the idea. I just wrote it down, because the Bible also says that it is God who works in us to will and to do. So for me, in a lot of ways, I have been led by desire. So I pay attention to the desires that are stirred in my heart, the more intimacy that I have with God. And then I would take them and then I would go and I would write them in that book. And what I noticed is, I think there was a period where I'd write and then I closed the book. Then I went back, to my safe life, very uncomfortable safe life, which I hate. And then something would awaken in me again. And then I'll think, no, I feel like I'm supposed to live, a different path. And I would go back to the book. I wouldn't read the old stuff. I would go back and I'd like rewrite and I'd rewrite. And then I started flipping through the book and I started seeing that whenever I would have this stirring, there was a consistency in the desires. Wow. There was consistency in something that was being imprinted on my heart, to do. And then fast forward, it's been a journey for me. It's been a journey. And one of the reasons why the journey was longer than it was supposed to be is because I was too afraid to step out of my comfort zone. That is the reason that it took longer. And then at some point I did decide to step out of my comfort zone. I went for this internship program in Cape Town, South Africa. I mean, it was incredible, met some amazing people there. When I arrived there, I'd let go of all the comforts. I no longer had comforts to kind of lean on. Yeah. So now I gave myself the freedom to say, I'm going to dive completely because I truly want to know what it is that I was created to do. And while I was there, I started doing everything. If I was asked to do something, I'll be like, yep. I actually made a commitment to myself in the beginning of the year, because one of the things that has kept me from doing things is fear, right? The fear of failure. And I would say no to a lot of things because I was just so afraid that what if I say yes and then it doesn't work? So I made a commitment that anything I'm asked to do, I'm going to say yes. I don't care what it is.
Really? Like anything? Like
anything. I mean, unless it's absolutely like wild, like off a bridge or something.
So let me just clarify this. So you went into this program, you had your own presets of like what you want to call to do. But if you were asked to do something like pack chairs or something that was absolutely not in your desire, you'd be okay with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I saw everything as purpose in that season. Like I literally just kind of like scrapped everything away. And I said, anything that I'm asked, I don't care what it is. I was singing in the worship team. I was carrying chairs to go set up for the Women's Empowerment Program, running the Women's Empowerment Program, doing the admin for that. It wouldn't matter what I was asked to do. I was invited to go somewhere as a guest speaker. I'm like, lovely, I'll do it. I went to some blogger's writing thing, submitted something to write there, ended up, literally anything that I was asked to do, I said yes to, because I wanted to set myself free from the fear of failing, because that fear is the thing that was keeping me from discovering what God had called me to do. I think that one has to have the courage. You have to have the courage to like let go of like the self-limiting beliefs and let go of the kind of the boundaries and the things that are keeping you so safe that you're afraid to kind of step out there. And you're not stepping out there by yourself, right? I stepped out there with like, God, what were you thinking? And I kept asking this question, what were you thinking when you created me? But what I found is that when you are in the place that you kind of belong, or when you're using like the gift, when you discover like, what is that thing that you have been given, right? So it is what is in your heart, what is in your hands. And I talked about what is in your heart, right? Because I can think, okay, well, for some reason I'm stirred towards women, I'm stirred towards orphans, I'm stirred towards this, but what am I supposed to do with them, right? Or what am I supposed to use to even empower them? Like I want to see them empowered. I can't articulate what that looks like, but I feel like I want to impact these people. What do I have to use? And then now that goes to what is in your hand. So now for me, the reason I said yes to all of these things, I wanted to see which tool in my hand was bringing the most impact.
Wow.
So it was what is the thing that the soil favors, right? When I do this thing, it brings about double the impact when I do anything else. And for me, I could see it, like I could sing and I'm like, yeah, I can sing, but I can tell you that lives are not going to be changed because I sang. I can tell you that now. Some people's lives would change if somebody else sings. For me, it's now something I would still do, but I do that for fun. I enjoy doing singing. I enjoy doing worship, but I could have a sense when I was in different places where I'm like, I don't feel like this is where I fit. I might enjoy doing this, but I don't feel like this is where I fit. And I was doing a session once, it was during the program, and I was actually facilitating this women's empowerment program, which, believe it or not, I didn't even want to do in the beginning. But as I was doing this, I had a moment. There was something about when I was in this place where I felt like I didn't have the gift. I felt like the gift had me. So it felt as though I wasn't functioning out of like taking the gift and then kind of like doing something with it and shaping it. There was a time where it felt as though the gift of words had me. I was the vessel for the gift of words, if that made sense. And it kind of went beyond me. It went beyond my humanity. And I had that aha moment. I was like, this is what I was born to do. And the moment then I had that discovery, and then it starts from there, because then I said, okay, words, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do with these words, but I could feel everything in me saying, this is what God was imagining when he created me.
That's so powerful. And I suppose, on a personal level, like that changes and shifts a lot of things as you move forward. Well, that's really, really powerful. Thank you for that, Romayne. I think I just have one more question. I get this question a lot as well, and I would love to hear your thoughts about it. If anyone who's listening to us, to our conversation right now, is really struggling with their purpose, whether they're just starting a family or business or whatever season they're in, a lot of people struggle with this. What is your practical tip in helping people discover their purpose?
So again, I think number one, everything has to flow from your relationship with God. So I'm going to start there. You cultivate that relationship, because it's from that everything else flows. At least that's for me. For me, I depend on that. Again, I trust my desires when I have good intimacy with God, because I know that if I have good intimacy with God, then he's shaping my desires, right? Wow. So for me, that's the first thing. So I don't sit there and start thinking, is this thing that I'm desiring, is it a good thing? You don't need to think, is, taking care of orphans a good thing? It's a good thing. You don't have to overthink some of these things, because sometimes we're like, what if I wasn't supposed to take care of orphans? And I think God's going to be okay with that. Like, it's quite okay. So I think that's the first thing I would say. I think the second thing that I would say is to give room then to be connected with the desires that you feel that are being imprinted on your heart, right? I think just start putting those things down and just start thinking, okay, I don't know why, but I care about, for some reason, I'm feeling moved, to do something for men in business, right? I'm feeling moved that I want to do something in that. Then that's great, right? So make way for the desires, and have the trust that as you're cultivating the intimacy, that the desires are being shaped in you. And then kind of like give yourself room to be connected with that. And don't be afraid that, it doesn't line up with what you're qualified to do, what you've studied to do, etc. Forget all of that. Almost like put everything aside. Put everything you think you are aside, put everything you think you've studied, the path that you're on, the job that you're on. For now, just make room to be connected to the things that are in your heart. And a lot of times you will be surprised to discover that some of these things, if you remember back 2 years, 3 years, you're like, wait a minute, I remember I had a desire to do that. That's where that was coming from, So kind of like take time to really like meditate and think on those things and embrace them. And then the next thing would be look at what it is that you're capable of doing. What is it that you know how to do? Do you know how to speak? Do you know how to write? Do you know how to, there's in the Message version, I can't remember what the scripture is, but it talks about doing the creative best with what it is that you have. Wow. You don't need to kind of like sit at home and say, okay, so I have the gift of words, so we'll see what's going to happen. Something is going to like lead me to do something with that. No, I do the creative best with what I've been given. You have to be a steward over the gift that you've been given. Yeah. And being a steward is that you perfect it. I study. My house is covered with books and things, and I study about the topics that I want to talk about. I ready myself so that when the opportunities and the doors open, I have something to say, and I know the message and that I'm trying to deliver. When I deliver a message, I look back and I say, okay, that could be better. I also, spend time and I write. So you have to do things proactively. You can't like wait for people to come and give you the opportunity. I was actually reading the book of Acts, and it was talking about Paul, and it says that he was kind of sitting and he was basically talking to people about the gospel. But then it says, as was his custom to do. That was his custom. He knew what his purpose was. He wasn't kind of there being like, oh, waiting for the purpose and the door of opportunity to be opened.
Yeah, you walked into it. Like he just went for it. Yeah.
Exactly. He was intentional about walking into it. Be intentional and be unafraid. God has no issue with directing you if you're moving. We can't move a ship that's stationary. You need to be trying and going somewhere, and you will find that the right people will come along, the right resources, the right inspiration, the right words, the right comments. So be honest, because I think that the fear of getting things wrong, it's always fear. It's the fear of even stepping out to try is the thing that limits us from being able to do anything. You can't discover anything about yourself stationary. You can't discover yourself. You can't discover your gifts. You can't learn. You can't grow. You have to be willing to have the courage to step out there and try. And God honors that, right? If you take steps in faith, God honors the steps that you're taking in faith. He has no problem with speaking. He has no problem. Like, I have a very strong conviction that you will hear a word behind you saying, this is the way, walk ye in it, right? And then the last thing for me, or maybe two more, but you have to grow in your character, because sometimes like the inability, if you do not grow in character is capacity, right? If you grow in character, then you have the capacity to be able to carry your gift well. If you do not grow in your character, a lot of the times your purpose will be short-lived. So even if you see that I have an issue of people pleasing, that is a big problem. People pleasing is actually one of the key issues that Saul had. If you go and read his story, because every time he did something that was against what he was supposed to do, and he was asked about it, he would respond by saying, the people said. That was the root of his problem. So if you have like a people-pleasing problem, you need to deal with your people-pleasing problem, because that will be the thing that will put a cap on your potential. Yeah. So I think like character and growing in your character, because then you grow in capacity. And then, and then also, again, when you're looking at character and you look at like biblical principles, when it talks about having discipline yourself towards purpose, be focused towards purpose. So I think it's a lot of it goes down to intentionality, right? being intentional about how you're developing with the things that have been put on your heart. It's easy thing to go back to. It's easier than it seems. Go to your heart and look at your hand, and then do your creative best with what it is that you have been given.
Wow. Amen to that. That is so, so powerful. I just took some notes here because it was too good to miss. Romayne, thank you. Thank you so much. That has been such an encouraging conversation. And I know a lot of our listeners are beyond blessed to hear that. How can our people reach you? And if you have a program, how can they join that?
Okay, well, you can find our program on esteemkultur.com. That is Esteem, KULTUR.com. And you will see our program there, our main program, Now I Flourish, which is a 12-week program. And if you want to join that, please just show your interest. We run that here in Helsinki. We also have like an international group that we work with. So just put in your interest and I'll get in touch with you.
Romayne, thank you so much. And I know a lot of people will be joining this program, and for sure it will bless generations as well. Thank you, Romayne. It was nice talking to you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
This podcast is brought to you by Lily of the Valley Farm Retreat. Come together at Lily of the Valley. Asaka.ph, your geo solutions partner.